Hey, Eric, Mr. Katzen. Just want to give you a little bit of feedback on your Zen analysis paper. I've already read through it once. Just want to touch base with you real quickly. Overall, I've added this comment at the bottom. Your perspective of Zen is one we all, to some degree, share, especially many historians, and we've already talked about this. However, one theme that keeps coming back over and over in your work is your argument of Zen's desire for a utopian society. Um, What's your evidence for this utopian society? Is it rooted in Zen's arguments itself? Is it rooted in perhaps some of the bias we hold from Zen's, or the recognition that Zen himself was perceived as many even still today as a radical, kind of a revisionist, certainly Marxist historian? This may be overstated a bit, but I'd like to see more evidence into your argument for why Zen desired a utopian society, and did he really desire this? Again, you argue this represent the coming of a socialist utopia. Did he really believe this? Was Zen seeking some type of utopian society based on socialist norms and values? That's certainly debatable. Within your thesis, you also go on to argue he also had great socialistic dreams. Where is this rooted? Again, we're seeking evidence in this. I would suggest go back to page 17 and 18 of Zen's People's History. I'd also look at, I believe it was page 110, 111, 12, somewhere in there, this notion of a socialistic society. That wasn't really Zen's position. He sought social justice, but that's not socialism. Huge difference. So I would recommend possibly looking that up. In any case, I'd love to get some feedback from you on where your evidence lies in the socialist dream, because it's not really evident within your work. You also argue in his book, he tells a story of America rarely seen. And that is a notion of Zen shared by many, many historians. Now, this right here, Las Casas, you bring out this evidence, well stated, that evidence, as you suggest in Zen, helps to support the idea of perhaps America isn't rooted in the greatness one once thought, and these arguments of Native Americans being eradicated, perhaps even genocide. You firmly establish in your reader's mind in this section, right through here up to the Columbian Exchange, the Native American was eradicated in what is perhaps arguably a genocide. And this kind of sets the tone for much of Zen's work that you go on to explain. And then you certainly talk about the Columbian Exchange. But you also argue that although these things are missing in many of the textbooks, you go on to make it clear Zen had an agenda. And this perhaps is your thesis. Much of the work builds up to this idea. You offer your reader time and time again support of your thesis and suggest that Zen was writing almost revisionist history, but telling it from a perspective rarely told in textbooks. And all of a sudden you drop this bomb, he's writing from an agenda. Is this bias or an agenda? And I think you do a fairly good job of arguing that it is aggressive and it is subtle at times. However, in the end, like most writers, almost every writer has an agenda. And Zen's agenda is to demonstrate that history in America, which is often not told. And you present that with solid evidence and support. Overall, you offer a fair assessment of Zen. I think your assessment could have been rooted again and steeped a little less in this notion of a utopian society you offer here. However, your evidence and your arguments from the book itself support your position. Beyond that, your inclusion of DJ Bob, Howard Zen and the Art of Anti-Americanism, and how you bring in the Wall Street Journal article and the position of that. Indeed, he vilifies capitalism, vilifies all that America is great for, and recognized throughout the world. This is a nice counter argument to the one you offer. In the end, Eric, your evidence, your knowledge of Zen's arguments, and your recognition of his clear agenda, supported by not just your own, but other historians' works, makes for an interesting and important read. Just be sure you maybe clarify some of these other arguments I've already alluded to in terms of socialism evidence.